I think there's also a thing about removing the jargon. I still, I don't like jargon, and certainly a lot of the things which have come out in terms of in recent years have been heavily jargonized. I think one of the things was this transformation. I'm getting my 10-minute warning, so that's good. Thank you, Colin. I will do this and keep on time. There's an issue I mentioned about green and using, it can actually mean lower unit costs. I think there's a lot of good information out there, and I think if that is put forward as being the key part to know this, then again, a lot of good things to do that. But then I think there's also some very sharp things that we do need to do. I mean, there's a lot of people who think about setting targets as being a way of doing things. I've got mixed givings about targets. I certainly think, without making any points of a political nature, that in the last 10 years, we've seen too many targets on too many things to the point that people actually don't actually know what the hell's going on in some things, And when you actually have super performance indicators, you just think, please, I can't deal with any of this anymore. So there's some issues about how we actually, what we are going to do targets, let's keep them very, very few, let's keep them very focused so they actually make a difference. Then there's also this very interesting about integrated business planning. I do not like to see procurement sustainability strategies being separate from procurement strategies. Sustainability strategies needs to be integrated into the whole business and planning process. It's not something you put on the side there and then someone comes along and says, oh, and by the way, don't forget this, because it will be forgotten, regardless of whether you remind them or not. So it does need to be integrated and how it actually means, the targets. We are going to have to move, I think, away from tick boxes and go on some of the smarter thing. And this comes down on procurement to understanding markets and the best level to engage in order to achieve an outcome. And I'm just going to run you through something which is pretty well hot off the press. It's only a summary of it on food and catering, because this is something that a lot of people in sustainability have actually been doing things for quite a few years on food miles, in terms of sort of organic farming, all those good things, and a lot of people have got great ideas of how you can actually do it. So we've actually done in London a detailed analysis of what goes on the food and catering things, and these are some of the results of it, which I thought you might be interested in. The spend across London is about £87.1 million. As you can see there, we've looked at it in very much detail, and it is as we expected, a relatively small area of expenditure, about 1% of the overall influenceable spend. But what is very, very clear, very, very quickly, is the suppliers. 16 suppliers out of the 684 actually accounted for 71% of the spend. So immediately you've got big, as with all sectors in construction and things like that, big providers dominating the market. Normally should start telling you something, and there is some overlap, but a lot of these suppliers are actually used by one London authority on their own. And when you actually look at them, they're local cafes, they're local sort of food and catering things with the sandwiches and things of that nature. And in terms of spend, they really aren't worth getting excited about. They are very small businesses, and that's obviously a very important part for the future. But at the same time, we've got to try and deliver cashable savings and the local objectives. London doesn't have the issue about having to use local suppliers, because in many respects I don't think there are many farms within the M25, but certainly for other regions it is actually a major issue. Moving on to this though, in terms of the suppliers I dominated, there's 25 London authorities actually had a contract with one of those providers, accounting for about £8 million altogether in total. In terms of being smarter, it doesn't actually look very good to have 25 different contracts with the same supplier to supply the same things. In most organisations, an £8 million contract would actually have one contract and one sort of manager, not 25. So it's getting one's head around how this may actually be look at for the future. Also within there's quite a few supply chain supermarkets, as Sainsbury's and such as, often used by care homes and schools. And again, this provides all sorts of opportunities, because they are big players. They do actually have a lot of interesting policies and what have you. And I said now some national providers, like Hobart's, Electrolux, etc., which actually look after food, what they call it, catering equipment and things of that nature. So there's a real mix of that. And we've actually had a look at how we can actually apply some of the optimal influence here. I don't think you can see that very clearly. On the supply positioning side of stuff, the one on the left-hand side actually is the spend for the whole of London. As you say, we've broken that down. We've got data and analysis, 5 years worth of data now from 30 London authorities. But when you actually do food and catering services, you'll see there it's all bottom left stuff in terms of routine and leverage. So that the key message is in there is there are savings to be had. Certainly on the leverage side, probably quite significant savings. On the routine side, probably not that much. But that being said, there's very little of, if anything, that registers there in terms of the strategic things. So that actually says, okay, how are we actually going to get at those savings, and how are we actually going to put our policies into place? So what were the conclusions that we actually looked on this? First of all, and this is actually still being discussed and maybe put into position practice in the not too distant future, and it's actually consistent, I think, with OGC thinking on this one. That certainly, as far as this category is concerned, will suggest we actually have regional leverage in terms of actually getting the savings out. Regional approach, maybe sub-regional in places, is the way forward, which again is an encouraging thing to actually do. And again, we know there are quite a few efficiency gains to be had in there because we know there's competition, common specifications and contract standardisation are possible because people like the prison service and Ministry of Defence, the police and others have actually been doing this for many, many years. MOD have had category management in food for ages. So when people say to me it's not possible in local government, I would say, well, actually, I don't agree with you. In fact, MOD buy more food than the whole of local government put together, which actually does give an indication of the opportunities there. There was also a proliferation of common suppliers, which actually suggests that we can practice smarter ways of supplier relationship development by actually getting them and working with them to actually take costs out. Having 25 relationships with the same provider means there are no opportunities for actually linking delivery schedules and things like that. So immediately there's a whole green agenda attached to this if you actually start looking at it from a different approach. I don't have time because Colin's going to time me out on this one in terms of going into the details of it, but there is a lot when you start looking at things from a different angle where you can actually start the negotiations. And from a provider's point of view, if you think about it, you approach a provider who actually said, we're going to give you a streamlined approach. You don't have to do 25 lots of competitive tendering and things like that. It's got to be rather attractive, hasn't it, in terms of that. And it's also going to be attractive in terms of the way you can actually open the negotiations and things on how you actually apply the sustainability agenda within there. And I think the other things to actually look on this one is the fact is that policy for supplier food policy is almost certainly best looked at from a regional point perspective. I mean, 33 London authorities all arguing the issue about food miles isn't really going to make much difference. A collective London view or a collective northwest of England view will have a much better chance of actually gaining success. And there's a point I was making earlier, that you don't have to be seen to be doing something about everything. In some instances, it's better to actually say that I'm not very well positioned to do anything about this. I will actually hand it over to someone else. Someone asked me a few years ago when I was on the, as a director of the LCE, about what am I going to do about making Jamie Score's dinners a reality, to which my response was absolutely nothing. I can't do anything. I can't change eating habits on my own. It was, oh, but you're an influencer. I thought, well, no, I'm not an influencer to actually go and get little kids to actually stop eating chips and things like that. I think where you actually apply this is at a sensible level as to where it's going to give the most thing. And I resisted the push to actually be seen to be doing something. So those are the conclusions. I mean, as an example on food, this approach can be, or I think it's fair to say, can be applied to a whole sorts of other areas, including construction, highways, even ICT. I think you'll see in the coming weeks and months ahead, you're going to see a complete revolution. I feel, I can't confirm that. I know that in the whole way that actual public services do actually acquire their provisions, their services, how they engage with markets, and how they actually start doing, doing things smarter. Because I certainly think that going out to the supplier and saying give us 25% off what you're charging at the moment isn't going to actually get us very far. We're going to have to go back with something which actually incentivises them to do something and actually encourages them to take costs out of the equation. But in doing so, that's the opportunity for people here, for people practitioners in sustainability, to actually get their name on the agenda and make it mainstream in the new world which will exist. Anyway, I've got 25 seconds left. All I'll say is thank you for listening to me. Thank you for sending me bits of paper, Colin. Appreciate it. And if I don't see you, have a good conference. Thank you very much.